So just a reminder as we're digging into this, again, we're looking from Daniel's point of view as he's receiving this. We get the privilege of looking back, and so we get to connect a lot of the historical stuff. We get to look back because we have the historical context, right? And we have the privilege of having many scholars and researchers and archaeologists to help sort things out, figure things out, put things together for us, and to see just the sovereign hand of God throughout time. Daniel hasn't gotten there yet, and so he's receiving this with awe and wonder and curiosity and confusion. And so, so keep that in mind as we're going through this. There are some big jumps in history that we'll see. We'll skip over some chunks of history, and that's not because it's unimportant, but because for Daniel, it's not what was needed, and for the people. For us looking back, we get to fill in all those blanks. So let's get started with Daniel chapter 11, verses 1 through 4. Have Jean read for us first. So when you're ready, Jean.
And as for me, in the first year of Darius the Mede, I stood up to confirm and strengthen him. And now I will show you the truth. Behold, 3 more kings shall arise in Persia, and a 4th shall be far richer than all of them. And when he has become strong through his riches, he shall stir up all against the kingdom of Greece. Then a mighty king shall arise, who shall rule with great dominion and do as he wills. And as soon as he has arisen, his kingdom shall be broken and divided toward the 4 winds of heaven, but not to his posterity, nor according to the authority which he ruled. For his kingdom shall be plucked up and go to others besides these.
All right. Thank you, Jean. So as we get started here, let's review and remember, who is it that's speaking here? We were introduced to this person in chapter 10. I think if we just jump in here, we might think it's Daniel speaking, but remember, this is being given to Daniel. So who is speaking here? Do we remember? What's that?
Jesus.
Yeah, the divine man, or Jesus, is speaking here. We were introduced to him in chapter 10. And what's he doing here?
Scared the heck out of Daniel.
Scaring Daniel, yeah, that's partly true, yeah. But what's he doing here? What's he saying he's doing with Darius? He's strengthened him. What does that mean? What do you think that means? Maybe made him more powerful. Maybe made him wiser. Maybe provided encouragement, success. Could be any number of these things as God is designing and making space in history for what's to come. It could be also dealing with spiritual warfare. It's not just us that deals with spiritual warfare. Even God's people back then dealt with spiritual warfare. And even people who don't know the sovereign God have spiritual warfare going on around them. They're just not aware of it.
Well, if we're correct, then he pointing Darius to lead with Cyrus, then he also had Cyrus issue a decree that allowed the Jews to go back to Jerusalem.
Right.
And so that was very important.
Right.
To Daniel and all the Jews that they were able to go back.
Yeah.
And rebuild the temple.
Yeah, like Tom was saying, this point in history, God moved in Darius to restore his people at this point.
So we are saying that Darius is the same as
Cyrus. Yes.
Most people.
Yeah, historically, that's what is usually agreed with. So if you remember that Ezra and Nehemiah is during this time where they go back and rebuild the city wall, they rebuild the temple. They're able to return back to their home. We know the stories around that. It was not easy. It was difficult. There were things that still had to be done. There's apathy. There was adversaries, all kinds of stuff. But we know that that was a provision that God worked through this pagan king. So, yeah. So what's Daniel being given in this moment? As we look at these last two chapters, what's the gift this divine man is giving to Daniel? Yeah, seeing a bit of the future. Absolutely. Maybe not clear peace, but something about it.
So this message came to Darius through Daniel, not directly from him.
Yeah, this is what's being given to Daniel. So
Okay.
if Darius is receiving it, then what's that?
Through Daniel.
Yeah, if he's receiving it, it would be through Daniel.
He didn't give this to Darius.
I don't think he did. Yeah,
Okay.
This is just the divine man
to Daniel.
to Daniel.
Okay.
Or at least not told that it's given to Darius. And whether he did that on his own, separate, we don't know. But we have a glimpse of what's to come. If we were to jump and connect to Revelation for a second, that revelation to John is a glimpse of what's happening, what's to come. Revelation is not this stated out one for one, this is the end of times and exactly what's going to happen. This is a larger picture of what's being given to the church at that time. Remember, they're being persecuted and tortured and killed for their faith. There's great fear. And so Revelation is a encouragement to the people saying, look, I win. Sorry, spoiler alert, but I win. And I have it handled. And so take courage, even if it means dying. Take courage, have no fear. Because nothing's going to take you away from me. It's that secure. That's the point of Revelation, is that encouragement to the church in the midst of that. And so God reveals his plan, overarching plan, and that's what we're going to see here as being revealed to Daniel, is an overarching plan leading up to Christ's first coming, as we see this. So, we're going to see some catchwords, concepts that tie things together. We're going to hear about Greece as an important player throughout some of this. The Greek kings, the four winds, the directions, northeast, southwest, those kinds of things. We'll have a focus on two of those directions for sure. And then we'll have the time at the end and those who have insight. So that's where these two chapters are going to really take us. So, verse 2. 3 more kings, with the fourth stirring up everyone against Greece. What's this referring to? Well, we're referring to these 4 kings. I don't know if I say these right, so bear with me. Cambyses, it's one of the kings. Gamada, Darius the first, and Xerxes are the 4 kings that are being talked about in these first chapters, or this first section here, when it talks about 3 more kings shall rise in Persia, and a 4th shall be far richer than all of them. These are the kings that we know it refers to. So again, that's Cambyses, so Cambyses. He reigned 530 to 522. Gamada, which is Gaumata. We have 522. Darius the First, 522 to 586. 46. Yeah. Okay. And then Xerxes, which is 486 to 465. Xerxes, we've heard his name in other places. Xerxes is also known, and I'm going to butcher this, but Ahasuerus. He is the king that is mentioned in the book of Esther. So if you remember Esther, the king is wealthy and doing well and has a queen, and he's pulling all kinds of things together. He wants this Queen Vashti to do something, and she refuses to do it. And so he says, off with you. Gets rid of her. and now is looking for a new queen, and that's where Esther comes into this whole picture. Obviously, there's a lot more context to that, but there's the connection, yes.
So, this is being told to Darius, why is there a Darius?
It's being told to Daniel.
It's told
I know,
Daniel.
but then forwarded to Darius. Why didn't it
Darius is not involved.
Yeah, Darius is not involved in this. We're not telling anything. We're not told anything specific that's being told to Darius.
Well, it says to strengthen Darius.
Well, that's what he's doing. So the
It
divine
says-
man
In the
is
first year of Darius the Mede.
right. So the divine man is working on strengthening, encouraging him, building him up. So the divine man is working behind the scenes to encourage him. So
But he's in power when this happens.
correct.
So why then is he telling about a future time when there's going to be three or four kings, and then there's going to be.
So that's what's going on right now. So this is all kind of panning out at the moment.
First one says, okay, right now I'm strengthening Darius. Now, Daniel, this is what's going to happen. So he's not talking with Darius at all.
I know, but this is during the time when Darius is in power.
Right.
And then they're
Yes. Starting
naming
his
all
power.
these kings, so Darius is in the middle of the list.
No, that's a different Darius.
Yeah.
Okay, that was my
And
question.
he doesn't, Larry named it. The Bible doesn't name it.
Right.
It just says 4 kings.
Right,
And Daniel probably didn't know what their names were. He
okay,
just
but
knew they
this
were
is
going
a
to be these
different
4
Darius that he's referred to.
Yeah.
That was all my
Okay.
question was.
Yeah, he knew there were going to be these
I
4
like how,
kings.
why is Darius at the first, in the middle of the list, when
Yeah.
Yeah,
Darius
okay, yeah.
is who this revelation is to build up?
Yeah. Yeah.
That was my whole question.
Gotcha.
Okay.
To Darius.
Yeah. Then there's going to be a couple more.
Okay.
Oh, you're going to hear about a lot of kings.
Yep.
I'm like, what?
Yep. So yeah. So yeah.
Okay.
Believe me, it was hard for me to track with this last night too. Kind of jumping into this. Yeah. So this is between the divine man and Daniel, and Daniel's being told about things that are happening at that moment and into the future. So, all right. That was the subsequent. Another thing to notice: the subsequent Persian kings. So those after these 4 are not mentioned. We're not told or given any kind of allusion to who they are or what anything they do, and that's because they're just mediocre. There's nothing special about their reigns, and again, this is a lighthouse, if you will, along the coast. The lighthouse only lights up certain points. The rest of the coast remains in the dark until the next lighthouse, where it pulls out another point. That's kind of where this is going. Verses 3 through 4. A warrior, Greek king, whose kingdom will be divided. Anybody have a thought on who this might be? A great warrior king in this time of history? Is Alexander the Great is what we believe this refers to. Yeah, the great warrior king. We know in secular history outside of biblical context, he's referred to it that way. Here in Scripture, he's referred to it that way. As a mighty king. And we know that his kingdom was also broken up almost immediately. As soon as verse 4 says, as soon as he is arisen, his kingdom shall be broken and divided towards the 4 winds. Alexander's reign was huge. It was quick. He conquered very quickly, all the way from Turkey, all the way over to India, parts of like Syria and those areas, the Fertile Crescent, and just a large area, one of the larger empires or largest empires in history, especially this time. And so, as fast as it was built, it also fell apart just as fast. Not because of, squandering things, but because he died. And so it was left in the hands of those who might come after him, which he had a son that was 5 years old and a son that was older. One was murdered, and the other one, being so young, didn't have a chance. And so his kingdom, this kingdom that Alexander had built, was divided into 4 pieces. And that's those kings or those rulers that we were looking at. And that's that point there. It will be divided into the 4 winds of heaven, but not his posterity. In other words, not to any family member. nor according to the authority which he rules. So in other words, it wasn't his decision. For his kingdom shall be plucked up and go to others beside these. So, yes. Split into four. So we'll end up focusing on two of these from the split. It's labeled the north and south. Now, don't get stuck on this compass rose where things are exactly north, exactly south, exactly east, exactly west. It's the Mediterranean area, and things are kind of wonky and turns. And so by north and south, it's just one's north and the other one's south of the other. There's others that are kind of north-ish. So here's where the four divisions happened. Just to kind of give you a picture. I wish I had a map to go with this, but one of the areas was Greece and Macedon. So think about where Greece is and the big chunk of territory above those islands. That's Macedonia. That's one area that would be considered probably the west if they were going to label it something. You have Thrace and Asia Minor. Asia Minor being Turkey, Thrace being territory off to the east of that. Obviously, that's north of the next one, which is Syria and Mesopotamia, but that's not the north. The north being referred to is the Syria and Mesopotamia area. You think about Iraq and Syria, Assyria, Lebanon, those kind of areas. And then we have Egypt and Palestine. So most of Israel south into Egypt being the one that we label the south. Okay. So if you can picture the map in your head, you can see it's not a perfect northeast, southwest, but they're given a four direction kind of idea. The kings for these, for Greece and Macedonia, is Antigonus and Cassander. Thrace and Asia Minor is Lysimachus or Machus. Syria, Mesopotamia is Seleucus or Seleucus. The first, Nicator. And then Egypt, Palestine is Ptolemy the first, Soter. Okay. We're going to hear a lot more of Seleucus and Ptolemy and their family lines. So I will do my best to remember to put the Roman numerals with these names because there's a lot of them. These kingdoms, they don't grow very fast, if at all. And we know that as we hear about them, we don't hear anything else about them here in Scripture. Now, historically and outside of biblical scholars, we know things happen and there's battles and betrayals and murders and that kind of geopolitical fighting and combatants and battles and things like that going on. So, but nothing major that God's wanting to point out to them at this moment. The fact that this is raised up, breaks into four pieces, and becomes these two major players is that first lighthouse, if you will, first point of taking it. Okay. Following the Persian kings only continues until one interacts with Greece, Xerxes the first, and then it jumps to the next section of this period of history. So, leave it at that. Let's read the next verse, verse 5. Anybody want to read?
Then the king of the south shall be strong, but one of his princes shall be stronger than he, and shall rule, and his authority shall be the great authority.
All right, thank you. So we have the king of the south, and one of his princes mentioned here. The king of the south again being most likely Egypt, Palestine, Ptolemy the first. Shortly after the death of Alexander in 323, Ptolemy was made satrap and later took the title king. In 321, Seleucus the first was designated satrap of Babylon. Antigonus attacked in 316 and fled to Egypt. In 312, Seleucus and Ptolemy defeated Antigonus at Gaza and returned to Babylon. They both took the title king at this point. So Antigonus, being the ruler, the satrap of Greece and Macedonia, decided he wanted to take some more for himself. And that's who is being referenced here in this historical piece. The North and South working together to defeat him. Probably west, if we, yeah. It's not really stated here in scripture, but if looking at a map, that is the logical. Verse 6. Seleucus. Is that how we say his name? Anybody know? Seleucus? Seleucus? U.S. Yeah. All right. I never know. It's a dead language, right? Nobody knows what it sounds like. All right, verse 6. Anybody want to read?
After some years they shall make an alliance, and the daughter of the king of the south shall come to the king of the north to make an agreement. But she shall not retain the strength of her arm, and he in his arm shall not endure. But she shall be given up, her attendants, he who fathered her, and he who supported her in those times.
Great, thank you. So here we have a mention to a piece of history. If you were to go to this chart that's we have in front of us, we have where first it kind of starts the division in brackets is where we are in time. So if you notice, there's Seleucus, then there's Antiochus on the right, and you have Ptolemy the first and Ptolemy the second, and then we have Bernice. This is the woman that's being mentioned here as the one that, and the daughter of the king of the south shall come to the king of the north and make an agreement, but not retain the strength of her arm. So this is Bernice that we're talking about here. Bernice's brother becomes king of the Ptolemy kings, and so that's Ptolemy the third there if you look to the left. So Bernice and Ptolemy the third are siblings. He retaliates for the murder of his sister and invades Syria. He then captures and executes Laodice. If you look to the far right, that would be Antiochus II's wife. So out of revenge, kills her because his sister was killed. So if you notice, Antiochus is married to two different people. When this happens, he captured many spoils of war. Since he is that king of Egypt, they take a lot of the idols, a lot of the Egyptian gods, a lot of the historical things that they used for their past worship back, because Babylon had taken all of that years and years before, and now they've finally gotten to the point where they can take it back. And taken by Persia as well. So in 525, when Persia was taking control of it. He returned home, and then after this, Seleucus II was able to reestablish his authority, and 2 years later unsuccessfully tries to invade Egypt. So we're going to start seeing this back and forth invasion fighting between these two kingdoms. So we have Bernice, the sister of Ptolemy III, marries Antiochus II. She's murdered. And as revenge, Ptolemy III then goes and kills his other wife, Laodice. And then we now come into this Seleucus II starting to reign. Okay, keeping up so far? No, I know. It's like a Days of Our Lives kind of thing.
So both of his wives died.
Yes,
Did he kill one of them himself?
that's what it sounds like.
He poisoned her.
They poisoned her, yeah,
Killed Bernice?
yeah,
He killed Bernice and two other people.
for being betrayers in secret. I don't know if it was at the same time, but I do know he was married to both of them, and it's very possible it could have been the same time.
I think it's the same thing.
Yeah. I mean, it's not unheard of that kings have multiple wives. In fact, it's pretty standard.
Marriage to Bernice was the one that arranged marriage.
Yes, well, yeah, it's definitely arranged marriage. The marriage was with Bernice, like Tom was reminding us, is that it was a political arrangement to try and bind these two together with the hopes that maybe one could control the other kind of thing, or maybe be subservient, or not subservient, but subversive to the other. A lot of that stuff happened.
It's like the Russians in the U.S. in the 70s, they taunted.
Yeah, and actually here, I just noticed this note here. Antiochus leaves his first wife, Laodice, to marry Bernice. So he wasn't married to Laodice before marrying Bernice.
He left her to marry Bernice?
That's what this note here sounds.
Well, then why bother to kill her?
Yeah, revenge. Revenge, man, it does stupid
Well,
things.
anyway.
Oh, well, here, the next note says 4 years later, he took her back. So there you go. 4 years later, he took her back.
Oh, okay.
So there you go. I guess I should read all those notes. Oh, and not only did, so the accusation isn't just that he poisoned Bernice. I'm trying to understand this now. Okay, so he left Laodice, it sounds like, because she allegedly tried to poison him. And then Bernice and her child is killed, so that her son, so Laodice may have poisoned Bernice and their child, so that her son Seleucus II would become king. All right. So,
It's not clear who poisoned who.
right. But the assumption or the working thought here is that Laodice would have, being left, having a child already with Antiochus, poisoned Bernice and her son, who would have become the next to reign, so she poisons them supposedly, so that her son could reign, and that's who reigns next is Seleucus II. There you go. It is like Days of Our Lives. All right.
Did Bernice ever have any children?
Yes, she had a child, but he was poisoned with her. Yeah. Nope, name doesn't show up here.
All right, here. There's a little, you want me to read this? It's
Sure.
a history book.
Here.
Okay, the Second Syrian War followed the death of, the Second Syrian War followed the death of Antiochus I. It took place largely on the Aegean coast of Asia Minor. A peace treaty between Antiochus II and Ptolemy resulted in losses by Ptolemy to both Antiochus and the king of Macedonia and Rhodes. Ptolemy sealed the peace treaty by offering his daughter Bernice in marriage to Antiochus. I'm sorry. The Seleucid king disowned his wife, how do you pronounce her name? Laodice, and her children to marry Bernice. Bernice had a son by Antiochus, who she hoped would succeed her husband. Yet by the end of his lifetime, Antiochus had abandoned Bernice and their young son in Antioch and returned to live with Laodice and their son Seleucus II in Asia Minor. Laodice poisoned Antiochus, and upon his death she declared Seleucus to be the rightful heir to his father's throne. The death of Antiochus II resulted in the struggle for succession and the Third Syrian War, as it is sometimes called, the Laodicean War.
There we go. All right, thank you for filling that in. As you can tell, there's a lot of history going on here. And we're just hitting highlights of it. Anybody ready to go for a marathon all day on this? All right, verse 7. Verse 7 through 9. Anybody like to read that? 7 through 9.
That from a branch of her roots, one shall arise in his place, who shall come with an army, enter the fortress of the king of the north, and deal with.
Hi, my name is Jessica Langan, and I had a message to call. I believe it was from Lisa.
Shall also carry these
Yeah.
their tribes captive to Egypt with their princes and their precious articles of silver and of gold. He shall continue more years than the king of the north. And the king of the north shall come to the kingdom of the king of the south, but shall return to his own land.
Thank you. Yeah, more confusion. Sounds like Game of Thrones. Oh, yeah, Game of Thrones. Yeah. They're all the same. aren't they?
Good Lord.
Jessica, I didn't know if you were asking a question while she was reading or not. Okay. I'll come back. All right. So verses 7 through 9. So Bernice's brother becomes king of the Ptolemy kings in Egypt. So Ptolemy III there. He retaliates for the murder of his sister, invades Syria. He captures and executes Laodice. He captures many spoils of war. That's where he takes those idols and takes them back. And as he returns home, Seleucus II was then able to reestablish his authority. So the son there, after this war, after Laodice was beaten as queen at that time, now he's succeeding as king and establishing his reign. So, and then 2 years later, he tries to invade Egypt and is unsuccessful. So now he's going to retaliate. And that's in verse 9 there. All right. Ready to keep moving? Okay. Well, so part of what Tom read out of the history book covers these verses as well. So yeah. So the only new more murders, more war, more murders. Yeah, changes of power. So this battle that Tom was reading about with Laodice, whatever her name is, she was ruling at that moment until her son could reign. And that's where that war and battle came. And when she died, after they came back, Ptolemy III came back from defeating her and bringing back those gods and things that they had taken away from them. Then Seleucus II there is when he kind of took his reign, because now mom's dead. And so then at the end of this verse, in verse 9, it alludes to him now trying to go back and get revenge and going to war and being unsuccessful at that. All right, verse 10. Am I read?
Verse 10,
Yes.
how far?
Just verse 10.
Okay. His sons shall wage war and assemble a multitude of great forces, and shall keep coming and overthrow and pass through, and again shall carry the war as far as his fortress.
All right. So this is post Seleucus II trying to battle Egypt and is returning home empty-handed, being beaten. Now we hear about Seleucus III, the son of Seleucus II. Reigns only about 3 years before he's murdered in 223 by his brother Antiochus III. So if you look at the chart there, you see Antiochus III, also the Great, which we'll get to that in a second, is Seleucus III. Seleucus III was who reigned first. Antiochus killed his brother after reigning for 3 years. And he became a military commander king. And so that's where he receives this title, Antiochus the Great. Ptolemy IV, if you look over to the left there, Ptolemy IV has been reigning part of Seleucus II's reign. Is established. He is seen as a weak king. Ptolemy IV. This is Philopator. Yeah, he came in as a teenager. And so, taking advantage of that, Seleucus seizes the opportunity and regains Syria. So now, the Seleucids had lost Syria to Ptolemy. So originally Syria was part of the Seleucid kingdom. And now he takes advantage of this weak king to get it back. He also takes Palestine. So not only does he take back Syria, he also takes more with it. He takes Palestine with it. In 219 to 218, which had been under control of Egypt until that time. So Palestine had belonged to Ptolemies up until this moment. A lot of fighting over the land of Syria. Okay. The fortress referred to here in verse 10 may refer to the temple fortress, which is mentioned again in verse 31. It is believed to be that Jerusalem mount and fortress. So we're starting to see these wars are going to impact the people of God that are still living at this time. And we're going to see that the land is going to be, this battle and war is going to divide things up to a point where God's prepping for what the geopolitical scale is going to look like for Christ to come as these things come and go. So, verse 11 and 12. May I read?
Then the king of the south, moved with rage, shall come out and fight against the king of the north. And he shall raise a great multitude, but it shall be given into his hand. And when the multitude is taken away, his heart shall be exalted, and he shall cast down tens of thousands, but he shall not prevail.
Thank you. So the response then of Ptolemy IV, after losing Palestine, losing Syria, is to what?
Let's get it back.
He wants it back, right? You took it away from me. I want it back. It's not like children. It's my toy. So in 217 BC, he launches a counterattack. They fight in Raphia, in Palestine. Polybius reports, so Polybius is a historian. He reports that the Egyptian forces numbered 70,000 infantry, 5,000 cavalry, and 73 elephants. The northern kingdom, the Syrian kingdom, if you will, had 62,000 infantry, 6,000 cavalry, and 102 elephants. Okay? Antiochus was defeated, the king of the north, and he raised up a great army, but was given into the hand. He lost 17,000 versus Ptolemy's losing 2,200. So, big whooping, right? Massive loss. So, Antiochus the Great is handed a big defeat. So Ptolemy then regains Palestine and southern Syria. Not all of Syria this time, just the southern portion of it. But he did not press his advantage. He could have continued to press his advantage, but chose not to. He returned to Egypt. Interestingly here, part of that military were mercenaries, and they were very strong, smart mercenaries. And when they returned to Egypt, they had a chip on their shoulder. And the king, Ptolemy, was wanting to put them to work elsewhere, and they said, no, we don't take orders from anybody. We're our own bosses. You're not the boss of me. And they rebelled against Ptolemy. And so it created some havoc. It created instability. It created some division during that time. And we'll see that continue on here. There's mud still? All right, Daniel chapter 11, 13 through 19. Okay.
For the king of the north will muster another army, larger than the first, and after several years he will advance with a huge army fully equipped. In those times many will rise against the king of the south. Those who are violent among their own people will rebel in fulfillment of the vision, but without success. Then the king of the north will come and build up siege ramps, and will capture a fortified city. The forces of the south will be powerless to resist. Even their best troops will not have the strength to stand. The invader will do as he pleases. No one will be able to stand against him. He will establish himself in a beautiful way and will have the power to destroy. He will determine to come with the might of his entire kingdom and will make an alliance with the king of the south. And he will give him a daughter in marriage in order to overthrow the king. But his plans will not succeed or help him. Then he will turn his attention to the coastlands and will take many of them. But a commander will put an end to his insolence and will turn his insolence back. After this, he will turn back toward the fortress of his own country, but he will stumble and fall, to be seen no more.
All right, thank you. All right, so a lot's going to happen here in this section. So we'll continue to follow this chart here. So at this point, what just happened was Ptolemy IV is the one who counterattacked and took back southern Syria and Palestine. Okay, that's Ptolemy IV, who's seen as the weak ruler at a younger age. We're now moving into his son's reign, Ptolemy V, because Ptolemy IV and his queen died under mysterious circumstances. That's not that shocking, right? We don't know what that means. It was mysterious. Mystery. And so Ptolemy V became king at the whopping age of 5 years old. Could you imagine turning over to kindergartens? That'd be fun. So at this point, as Ptolemy V is king, obviously someone's got to rule in his stead, whether an advisor or relative or somebody. So Antiochus III, who's again on the Seleucid side, he attacks and takes back Syria. Okay? So he wants back Syria. He wants that back. Still upset for that first loss. Scopas is a historical name. Scopas is the Egyptian general at this time. A battle at Peneus, which is the worship center for the god Pan. Modern times called Caesarea Philippi. Antiochus gained control of the southern Syria and Palestine in that battle. So at this point now he's taken back Syria, which he originally owned. Now he's taken back all of Palestine. And now Palestine will remain in Seleucid control for the rest of this time. It will not be in Ptolemaic control anymore. Many rebellions occur in Egypt at this time. So those rebellions from those first group, which may have had something to do with that mysterious death, their rebelliousness is still continuing on. We're not sure what this reference to the violent men here in these scripture passages refer to. It's not really straightforward. There's thoughts that it could have been Jewish people that were sided with the Seleucid side. It could be Jewish people who were just wanting to get freed. Period. We're not sure what those violent men were. It could have been just some of those rebellious soldiers continuing on. But either way, they had a hand in this destabilizing and weakening the Egyptian kingdom.
It could be referring to at Antiochus when Antiochus III, when Antiochus III beat Soper, a bunch of Jews accompanied him down to Jerusalem and actually attacked Jerusalem to drive out the Jews. So that could be one.
Yes, that is another one of the thoughts too, yeah. So we have these rebellions. After that, the Egyptian general surrenders at Sidon. And a permanent Seleucid control over Palestine continues. That's the reference to verse 16 there, the beautiful land. He doesn't press further west or into Egypt because Rome is now finally being recognized as a player on the board. Instead, he gives his daughter Cleopatra the First, not to be confused with Cleopatra the Seventh. Cleopatra the Seventh is the one that we most famously know with Mark Antony. Okay, so good thing for Roman numerals, right? So Cleopatra the First is the one that he gave in marriage to Ptolemy the Fifth, also known as Ptolemy Epiphanes, knowing that there's a lot of upheaval and stuff going on, so that maybe she would undermine his rule and bring connection back to the Kingdom of the North, and maybe they could subversively take over the South and become all one. But instead, she ends up loving Ptolemy V and is loyal to him. So now his plans are ruined. His plan of giving his daughter in marriage backfired on him. So because this didn't work, he decided, let's look west. I'm going to go attack Greece. Well, unfortunately, Greece had partnership with Rome at this time, and so Rome had warned, do not touch Greece, but he did it anyways. And so in 192, he was defeated at Thermopylae, and he was continued to be driven east by Scipio, which was the Roman commander. And he put an end to insolence. So he fought him all the way back to Magnesia, which is in their territory. forced them to accept a treaty, Antiochus III, and as part of that treaty, they had to become vassals of Rome, which means they had to send money and goods and things to say, please don't beat me up. Please keep peace with me. The other part of this treaty was that they were expected to send hostages to be held there in Rome. So that if they rebelled again, those hostages' lives would be taken. Some of those hostages included some of their advisors, but also Antiochus III's son, Antiochus IV. So he was one of the hostages that was sent. Remember, this treaty was forced. Either you accept this treaty as it is, or we will continue to pursue and deal with you. Yes. It does. I don't have any notes to say. I'm assuming he's a little bit older at this point. Hopefully. Okay. Okay. There we go. So they're contemporaries, so they're both probably a little bit older. So if she's marrying age, he's got to be marrying age. Great. Thanks for sharing that. Antiochus the fourth. Hold on. Oh, sorry. Antiochus the third was killed in 187 by a local population after trying to pillage the temple to pay for his tribute to Rome. So he decided, I needed money. Let's go down to Jerusalem and that direction and try to pillage the gold and stuff out of their temples. And instead, he got whooped and died.
That was the great.
Yes.
He was martyred.
Yes. He died in battle.
He died.
Right. In battle. All right. We're starting to come up into the time of the 400 years. Actually, we are in the time of the 400 years before the Gospels, before Jesus comes on the scene. We're going to start seeing some connection now to the book of Maccabees. If you've ever read any of the intertestament texts, they're not scripture. There's some historical context to them. There's also some propaganda in those, which is why we don't accept them as biblical text. But nonetheless, they're valuable to read for historical reasons.
So is it safe to read that and not get
Yes.
astray?
Most of it, yeah.
How do you know the propaganda?
The propaganda is more political. So trying to promote sympathy towards their movement, sympathy towards their freedom, rejecting the kingships and reigns. In it has a lot of the rebellion and rebelliousness. You'll have a record of a couple people claiming to be the Messiah. It is part of the Catholic Bible. Yeah. So. All right, so let's continue on. Verse 20 through 28. Anybody like to read? Read.
His successor will send out a tax collector to maintain the royal splendor. In a few years, however, he will be destroyed, yet not in anger or in battle. He will be succeeded by a contemptible person who has not been given the honor of royalty. He will invade the kingdom when its people feel secure, and he will seize it through intrigue. Then an overwhelming army will be swept away before him. Both it and a prince of the covenant will be destroyed. After coming to an agreement with him, he will act deceitfully, and with only a few people he will rise in power. When the richest provinces feel secure, he will invade them and will achieve what neither his fathers nor his forefathers did. He will distribute plunder, loot, and wealth among his followers. He will plot the overthrow of fortresses, but only for a time. With a large army, he will stir up the strength and courage against the king of the south. The king of the south will wage war with a large and very powerful army, but he will not be able to stand because of the plots devised against him. Those who eat from the king's provisions will try to destroy him. His army will be swept away, and many will fall in battle. Bent on evil will sit at the same table and lie to each other, but to no avail, because an end will still come at the appointed time. The king of the north will return to his own country with great wealth, but his heart will be set against the holy covenant. He will take action against it and then return to his own country.
Great, thank you. All right. So Antiochus III is no longer alive, and so now his son, I think it's the son, let me make sure. Yes, Seleucus the Fourth is reigning at the moment, and he said because Antiochus the Fourth is still a hostage over in Rome, so Seleucus has to take over leading at this point. He sends his finance minister to Jerusalem to seize wealth of the temple. In other words, to tax them and battle and try it again, to pay tribute for Rome that he is inheriting from his father, the tax burden. And so at this point, there we have the Maccabean revolt. There's 3 reports. In 2 Maccabees chapter 3, sorry. It talks about God's angelic forces intervening and turning back this military move. This finance minister then, as he returns, kills Seleucus the Fourth. It's thought that it's possible he was in league with Antiochus the Fourth, because at this time Antiochus the Fourth was being returned to this kingdom. It was no longer, his term or time as a hostage was up, and he was being returned. And so on his journey back is when this finance minister offed the brother Seleucus the Third, or the Fourth, sorry. Okay. Antiochus IV then seizes control of Syria and Palestine. I'm sorry, not the finance minister seizes control of Syria and Palestine. He's the contemptible person being referred to here. He was in Rome, but was released. I'm sorry, let me go back here. Maybe it wasn't Antiochus IV, seized control of Syria and Palestine. He was in Rome, but was released in exchange for Seleucus the Fourth's elder son, Demetrius. So the brother who was reigning and then killed by the finance minister, his son was sent to be the new hostage so that Antiochus could be released. Okay, and in that time is when Seleucus the Fourth was killed. He gets an army, replaces the finance minister who fled, and becomes regent for his nephew, and co-regent with another infant nephew who was murdered about 5 years later. So because he's not supposed to be the legitimate king, he's the co-regent at this time, because Demetrius should be the one reigning. So now he's a co-regent, and now more of this. Yeah, we don't have the names after this on the chart, but more intrigue and murder and deception, right? Antiochus confirmed the Jewish right to the third, and gave him the right to internal self-government according to traditional Jewish laws. High priest was the local ruler in Jerusalem. His son Antiochus IV helped the high priest come to power, so he got to pick the high priest he wanted to be his little pawn there. And he was picked, this high priest was picked because the goal was to Hellenize, or to homogenize the religion and the culture and their hopefully ruling together peacefully, being ruled peacefully. Another priest offered a bigger bribe, and he so then became the high priest. So we can see that this culture of sin and evil and deception and murder and bribery and all that stuff is affecting the people of God at this time. The religious worship is being polluted with geopolitical movements. It's also what sets up the fact that we have two high priests during Jesus' time, because we know that this will continue on to be a political pawn for ruling Jews. Antiochus in 169 made campaigns against Egypt, and Ptolemy VI, who's the last one mentioned here, Antiochus's nephew, which is Cleopatra I's son. If you remember, Cleopatra married, and so now the son of, so Ptolemy VI is now Antiochus IV's nephew. Okay. Now we're starting to mix it up some more. He controlled most of Egypt. Except for Alexandria. Alexandria is a northern city-state that was ruled by Ptolemy VII, because his brother was made king in the rest of Egypt there in Memphis. So now we have two different capitals and city-states going here. Cleopatra II, which is their sister, reconciles these two people, Ptolemy and Antiochus. And so then it becomes unified one more time. So Egypt now has a division, the Alexandria city-state and the Egyptian city-state. She breeds peace between them so they can rule together. On their way back, they stop in Jerusalem and they sack the temple and seize its valuables. That's in 1 Maccabee chapter 1. All right. 29 through 35 is going to wrap up this historical section, and then we're going to have a shift. Anybody want to read 29 through 35? All right.
At the appointed time, he will invade the south again, but this time the outcome will be different from what it was before. Ships from the western coast lands will oppose him, and he will not lose heart. Then he will turn back and vent his fury against the Holy Covenant. He will return and show favor to those who forsake the Holy Covenant. His armed forces will rise up to desecrate the temple fortress and will abolish the daily sacrifice. Then they will set up the abomination that causes desolation. With flattery, he will corrupt those who have violated the covenant, but the people who know their God will firmly resist him. Those who are wise will instruct many, though for a time they will fall by the sword, or be burned, or captured, or plundered. When they fall, they will receive a little help, and many who are not sincere will join them. Some of the wise will stumble, so that they may be refined, purified, and made spotless until the time of the end, for it will still come at the appointed time.
All right, thanks. All right, so Antiochus IV, still reigning here. Ptolemy VI and VII were the two that were having that little spat in Egypt, where they had the two little city-states going, Memphis and Alexandria. Cleopatra II is the one that unified them. Antiochus, in that moment of wanting to take advantage of that, tries to invade Egypt, but is blocked by the Roman fleet because, as they are unifying themselves, they make a pact with Rome for protection. And so as he arrives down in Alexandria, hey, there's a Roman ship. They're like, what's up, dude? And so he ends up turning around and having to go back empty-handed. On his way back, he continues this process of trying to Hellenize the Jews. He begins to suppress their religion and looks at them more as servants and subjects instead of having this quasi get to rule yourself underneath me kind of thing. At this time, we can hear some of the words of persecution coming out. Some of those things that were made illegal were very important to the worship of the Jewish people. Those things were circumcision, the possession of scriptures, sacrifices, feast days, and some of the other smaller practices. They were all forbidden under penalty of death. Okay? So this religious life, this belonging to God actions and celebrations are now made illegal. That's a difficult position to be in. And we see how now this geopolitical tirade, hurricane, storm, whatever you call it, is now impacting the people of God here.
He also desecrated the temple by putting a statue of Zeus in there and then sacrificing a pig.
Yes, I was getting ready to say that. They're good, they're good. Yeah, one of the other things he did in December 6th of 167, as Tom was saying, he did detestable things in the temple. Set up a statue of Zeus and also sacrificed pigs, knowing that pigs were unclean animals to the Jews. And so this was a huge just insult, more than a slap in the face to them. But some of the religious leaders, the Jewish religious leaders, went along with it anyway. And this created this contention for the Jewish leaders because there were those who were super offended by it and resisted. And so it created some of this contention that we read in the Maccabean books. A priest named Mattathias and his 5 sons, they led a rebellion called the Maccabean Rebellion. It was named after his son Judas Maccabeus. It's probably one of the more famous things that we hear as Lutherans from that time period. It was a very important, very impactful moment on the Jewish stage there. So, all right, so now we're shifting. We're going to shift here. There's a kind of a solid shift here, starting at verse 36. We're moving. We have this evil figure, Antiochus III, who we see as an enemy of God, an enemy of the people of God, as he's oppressing them and doing these detestable things. And we're going to see some parallelism now being spoken as we are now changing course in the language and the direction of this vision. So let's read verses 36 to 45. Anybody want to read?
I'll read.
All right.
36 to 45 pieces.
And the king shall do as he wills. He shall exalt himself and magnify himself above every god, and shall speak astonishing things against the God of gods. He shall prosper till the indignation is accomplished. For what is decreed shall be done. He shall pay no attention to the gods of his fathers, or to the one beloved by women. He shall not pay attention to any other god, for he shall magnify himself above all. He shall honor the God of fortresses instead of these. A God whom his fathers did not know, he shall honor with gold and silver, with precious stones and costly gifts. He shall deal with the strongest fortresses with the help of a foreign god. Those who acknowledge him he shall load with honor. He shall make them rulers over many and shall divide the land for a price. At the time of the end, the king of the south shall attack him, but the king of the north shall rush upon him like a whirlwind, with chariots and horsemen, and with many ships. And he shall come into the countries and shall overthrow and pass through. He shall come into the glorious land, and tens of thousands shall fall, but these shall be delivered out of his hand. Edom and Moab and the main part of the Ammonites. He shall stretch out his hand against the countries, and the land of Egypt shall not escape. He shall become ruler of the treasures of gold and of silver, and all the precious things of Egypt, and the Libyans and the Cushites shall follow in his train. But news from the east and the north shall alarm him, and he shall go out with great fury to destroy and devote many to destruction. And he shall pitch his palatial tents between the sea and the glorious holy mountain. Yet he shall come to his end with none to help him.
Thank you. All right, so, and I misspoke earlier, it was not Antiochus III, it was Antiochus IV. That was oppressing Jews. And this is where the parallel starts to be created. This image, as the words talk about this till the end of time, is not end of time as we think of today, when Jesus' second coming, but more of when Jesus comes finally, the Messiah comes. The end of this time, when the time is decided. And so as we're hearing these specific historical events, now we're starting to get to this point where the divine man is saying, and there's going to be more stuff going on just like this. The world's going to keep on whirling. And we know there's a parallel here with Antiochus IV and what we call the Antichrist, right? That which rages against God, the church, his people. And so we start to see this lifting out of this parallel idea. We know the Antichrist is not a specific person in Revelation. It is specifically a way, the culture, the government that is against, basically the world's way that's against Christ. And we have that same kind of feeling going here.
Is there anyone who interprets 40 through 45 as not being the Antichrist, but being the Romans?
That's a great question. As I was skimming through a lot of this, I did not see that reference. Not to say that it isn't. From what I've been able to study, I didn't see it.
Because it sounds a lot like how the Romans.
It does sound a little bit, doesn't it?
It took a weird, but
Well, and we do know that that Antichrist is that continual world entity, right? And Rome was part of that. Luther mentions Rome being a part of the Antichrist throughout time. So I can see that connection being easily made. There's let's see, the man of lawlessness is mentioned here. The verse 35 gives us a clue as to the time of the end, really tying it to Antiochus, the foreshadowing of this coming to Christ, getting to the age of Christ. We see a lot of mirror images between the geopolitical powers that stir up the problems with religious problems that we're seeing going on through this. A lot of reliance on temporal powers instead of God, the fortress. Yeah. Okay. I'm gonna keep us moving for time. Let's read verses 1 through 4. Anybody want to read? Okay.
Then time shall arise, Michael, the great prince who is charged with good evil, and there shall be a time of trouble such as never been since there was a nation till that time. But at that time your people shall be delivered, everyone whose name shall be found written in the book. And many of those who sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake, some to everlasting life, some to shame and everlasting contempt. And those who are wise shall shine like the brightness of the sky above, and those who turn many to righteousness like the stars forever and ever. But you, Daniel, shut up the words and seal the book until the time of the end. Many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall increase.
Right, thank you. All right, some language that starts to sound familiar. Everlasting life, right? Resurrection. Yeah. Those that are in dust will be raised up. We have a reference to the resurrection on the last day here. And we have a point of the resurrection of the just and the unjust, right? They will rise in sight or in faith to eternal life. We also hear this sealing up the scroll. If we go to Revelation, we see that there's a scroll that has been sealed and cannot be opened. The idea when a scroll is sealed up is that only one person has authority to open it. And so God is saying, this is enough. We're going to seal it up because you're not going to understand, you don't understand this to begin with, and it's going to be opened at the appropriate time by the appropriate person. And that person is Christ. Now, this is not the same scroll that's referenced in Revelation. I don't want to confuse that. That's a scroll with the plan of all times, as we get to see in Revelation and hear about. But this more of this coming of the end of this time, the beginning age, to the coming. Start to make sense because we can now look backwards and see, right? Yeah.
Verses, one and first one and two kind of sound like the crucifixion. It says that there should be a lot of trouble in Roman times, such as never been seen until that time. At that time, your people should be delivered. Happened with Jesus, whose name shall be written in the book, and many of those who sleep like I recall reading that Jesus died and he's resurrected.
Yes.
It sounds very similar to what happened during the resurrection.
Yeah, there definitely is some similarities. The point to Michael is that he's this whole time, right?
Right.
He's been he said comes to Christ. Resurrection. A lot of the has a near and far realization of it. Yeah.
And looked, and behold, there stood one on the street, and on that end of the street. Someone said to the man clothed in the no wonders. And I heard the man clothed in the and it shall be for a time, times and a time, and that I heard that I did not understand. Then I said, my Lord, the words are shut up. Why? And be
It's active. It's also the same as the time in Revelation 12, verse 14, when the woman or the church is persecuted, but also protected from the serpent. So we have some more connections here going on. This time period matches, oh, sorry, I just read that. The time from Christ to final judgment is mentioned through this. Many will be purified, or in other words, made white by the work of coming Messiah. These are not meant to be literal days, these number of days that are given, where we would try and apply them specifically to something, but the idea that there's a set period is measured out. God knows what it is. And they're symbolic in this, both the coming of Christ and the second coming of Christ here, related to that 3.5 years. Each one is a little bit longer than the other. For those, that period that suffering will happen, for those who can last just a little bit longer. And for those that can last through the entirety of it, is that idea of what's going on through the turmoil, the persecution. Wrapping up this Daniel time, we as Lutherans believe that Daniel was written, and these chapters still were written together during the time of Antiochus I, not written partly here and then again during the Maccabean time. There's some critical scholars that say that they think that these two chapters were added later on. Well, there's a lot of problems that come with that, a lot of circular theory that has to be accepted in order for that to work. So that poses a lot more problems. So reality is that this is a gift to Daniel, though he doesn't understand what exactly it means because it hasn't been fully realized. It's a gift to him that's been given for us as Christians, as the church later on, opened and revealed to us because of Christ's coming. It's a reminder of the sovereignty of God in all things. That God, even though the world keeps raging on and doing these crazy things throughout the history that we talked about, he's still in control. His sovereignty still reigns, and he brings about the good in the world despite it, as we see through Christ. And he uses it all towards the salvation of his people. All right, we're wrapping up here. We're done here. Book of Daniel's done. Next week is Ash Wednesday, so we're not meeting. Love to have you join us for service if you're available, whether in the morning or the evening. There's the 8:30 service or the evening service. I believe is at 6:30. There is the fish and chips Ash Wednesday dinner next Wednesday. If you haven't signed up, I think today is the last day to sign up. Could be wrong. You may have another day, but go check it out. We'd love to have you. I know there's 170 people-ish planning to join for it, so it's gonna be yummy. It's gonna be in the gym. I love me some fish and chips. So, all right. So let me close us in prayer. And if you have questions or want to talk out something or something makes sense or want to clarify, I'll be here for some time. So let's pray. Almighty God, we give you thanks for this gift of your word. There's so much packed into it, and we know that there's so much we don't understand, and that's okay, because you are the sovereign God who has a complete understanding of all of it, who reigns through all of it, and has also proven to be good and gracious and loving, our good King. And so as we continue to chew on things and we look at the world around us and relate to some of the things going on today and things that went on then, may we be reminded that you are still in control of all things. And just like you brought out the first coming of Christ, we look forward to the second coming, knowing that it is with confidence we live each day, is with a full hope and faith that we live, and is by your love that all things work out for the good of those who love you. Be with us as we part ways. Bless the rest of our week. I pray this in Jesus' name. Do you have any questions?
You did an excellent job.
Thank you. That's very kind of you.
Bye.
All right, see you later.